I always thought I knew my children. I always believed that after everything I'd been through, after all the sleepless nights working to put food on the table, after every silent sacrifice they made, there was at least one thing guaranteed: respect. But that late afternoon, when I turned the corner and saw my own house with the door ajar, the living room light on, and two shadows moving inside, I realized something was very wrong. It wasn't a normal feeling. It was that deep tightness in my chest, the same one you feel when life is about to turn upside down. I opened the door slowly. The first voice I heard wasn't one of my children's. It was an unfamiliar, professional, cold voice, a voice trained to sound friendly, but which carried a calculated urgency. "He needs supervision. It's the best solution," said the man, holding a clipboard. As I took my first step inside, three faces turned to me at once: my eldest son, my daughter, and the man I had never seen before. He was wearing a light blue dress shirt, rectangular glasses, and fiddling with his clipboard as if he had already decided everything before even meeting me. "Dad," my daughter said, in that fake voice of someone who rehearsed the speech in the car, "we only want what's best for you." My honey. I swallowed hard. That phrase, said exactly like that, has already destroyed a lot of people. "What's going on here?" I asked, trying to control the tremor in my voice. My oldest son stepped forward, took a deep breath, and made that rehearsed expression, a mixture of pity and authority. "Dad, you're not doing well. You've been forgetting things, acting strangely. We got together and decided you need professional help." They met. They decided. As if I were an old piece of furniture that someone judges no longer belongs in the house. "Who is that man?" I asked, pointing to the figure with the clipboard. He smiled, a perfunctory smile. "I'm a social worker. I was called by your children to assess your condition. We're here to ensure your safety, and theirs as well." My breath caught for a second. Their safety? What does that even mean? I looked around and realized something even more painful. My house didn't feel like mine. They'd taken my pictures off the wall, moved some furniture as if they wanted to create space for something or someone. There was even an open backpack on the sofa with some of my clothes thrown in there. Everything was so fast. Everything was so organized, as if they'd already planned my departure. "You want to commit me to a mental institution?" I asked, unable to hide my shock. My daughter tried to come closer, but I took a step back. "Dad, you need to trust us," she insisted. "It's for your own good. You can't take care of yourself anymore." I remained silent for a few seconds that felt like hours, because in that instant, I realized that this plan hadn't been conceived that day. It was something that had been in the works for a long time, maybe weeks, maybe months. The kind of decision children make when they start to feel that their parents are a burden, a nuisance, a problem to be solved. "I take very good care of myself," I replied firmly, but feeling my stomach churn. The social worker moved a little closer, keeping his voice calm, but with a firm tone behind it. "We can do this amicably, or we may need to resort to legal measures. Your children have stated that you show signs of incapacity. They are worried. The word that destroys lives appeared there clear and cruel: inability." I took a deep breath, but my head was spinning. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick everyone out of there. I wanted to grab my things and run away. But I knew that any overreaction would be exactly the argument they wanted to use against me. "So that's it?" I asked, looking from one to the other. "Do you think I've lost my mind? Do you think I can't make my own decisions anymore?" My daughter looked away. My son remained motionless, but pressed his lips together, a sign that he was nervous, perhaps regretful, perhaps too determined to back down. "Dad, please, don't make it difficult," he said. "It doesn't make things difficult," as if I were hindering the kidnapping itself. The social worker delivered the final blow. "We have a vacancy available starting today. We just need your signature, or if you refuse, we can request an emergency measure from the judge. The process can be quick." My heart raced. That was it. They had prepared everything. The backpack, the speech, the professionalism, even the job opening. It wasn't a conversation. It was an execution. I stood completely still. The clock on the wall was making a noise I'd never noticed before. The ticking seemed to mock me, as if to say, "You're running out of time." So I took a deep breath, a really deep breath, and he simply said, "You have no idea what you're about to start." The room fell silent. The social worker swallowed hard. My daughter took a step back. My son seemed to lose his breath for a moment. Because at that moment, before they realized it, I had already understood everything. This wasn't going to end there. Not at all. And I finished by looking directly into their eyes. I just didn't know that afternoon would end up in a courtroom. What hurts the most isn't being called incapable. It's not being treated as someone who has lost their lucidity, strength, or ability to decide their own life. What truly destroys you inside is realizing that those who point the finger today forget, or pretend to forget, who you always were. Before being seen as a burden, before being pushed into an institution, before being reduced to the status of a problem, there was an entire life built on sacrifices that no one fully witnessed. A life that never fit into short speeches, nor into hasty diagnoses written by someone who barely knows your name. This father who is now accused of not being able to take care of himself, was, for decades, the cornerstone of his own family. A man who woke up before sunrise, often leaving home in the dark so that his children could wake up to a full refrigerator. He worked in places his children never set foot in. He faced rain, tremors, heat, humiliation, unfair bosses, double shifts, sleepless nights, and pains whose beginnings and ends only he knows. But he never complained. He never returned to the world the same harshness he received. There was a time when he was called strong, when people would say, if it were up to him, no one here would go hungry. When his own children would boast at school, "My father is hard-working. My father can take care of everything." That was the image they carried from childhood. The image of a silent hero who always solved everything, who always found a way out, who never let them lack anything. But as the years went by, what was admiration turned into demands. What was recognition turned into requirements. And what was love turned into habit, the kind of automatic. Love that people only realize existed when it's too late. This father also had dreams, though almost no one knows it. Small dreams, perhaps simple for anyone else, but which for him had the weight of something sacred. He dreamed of opening his own business, perhaps a small shop in the neighborhood. He dreamed of finishing his studies because life took him out of school too early. He dreamed of traveling somewhere where he would never have to look at the clock, where he could breathe without thinking about the next bill. He dreamed of a peaceful future. And above all, he dreamed of seeing his children walk safely, not with luxuries, but with dignity. But each of those dreams was shelved in their name, in the name of needs, urgencies, the opportunities his children had because he decided he would have less. He stopped buying new clothes to pay for university. He stopped renovating his house to finance an exchange program. She stopped taking care of herself to take care of them. And he never, ever asked for anything in return. This father was independent throughout his life. He didn't need anyone to help him get organized, pay his bills, or manage his days. He was responsible in every aspect of adult life. Bills always paid on time, medication taken on schedule, documents meticulously filed. He was the type of person who maintained an impeccable routine that no one noticed because it was so perfect that it went unnoticed. But the world has a cruel way of turning things, upside down. Just one stumble, one distraction, one tiny detail, and suddenly everything you've built becomes an argument against you. A lost key, a document forgotten in a drawer, a bill paid 2 days late, and that's it. It becomes proof of incompetence, as if decades of maturity and strength could be erased by a single slip-up. The truth is, nobody really knows this father, not as he truly is. The children only know the version they themselves created, a mixture of expectation, ingratitude, and haste. They see tiredness as weakness. They see silence as confusion. They see changing routines as imbalance, when in reality time is simply demanding repayment for what it took away in the past. What they don't know, because they never had the patience to listen, is that this father never stopped being strong. He just became too lonely, and being alone ages you more than any illness. Now illustrate the contrast. The one who was once a pillar is now seen as a burden. The one who supported the house is now treated as someone who is a hindrance. The one who solved everything is now treated as someone who needs to be managed. He's not incapable. He's just no longer useful in the role his children have placed him in his whole life. And when a father ceases to be useful in the eyes of his children, many begin to see him as a burden. But there was something inside him that resisted, something that no diagnosis, no signature, and no social worker could take away. The awareness of who he had always been. And that part of the story that nobody sees, was exactly what made that moment so unfair, so absurd, so violent. Because before any meeting with a social worker, before any conversation about hospitalization, before any signed document, there was a whole life lived with honor. And that was the life they were trying to erase. Things don't begin with a blow. They don't begin with a signature. They don't begin with someone knocking on your door accompanied by a social worker. Most family betrayals begin slowly, in a change of glance, in prolonged silence, in small gestures that, separately, seem harmless, but together scream a truth that no one wants to admit. And that's exactly how it all began in that home. Whispers, doors that used to be open now closed, conversations interrupted as soon as I entered the room. I remember exactly the first day I realized something was wrong. I was in the kitchen making my coffee when I heard two whispers coming from the hallway. Low, tense, rapid voices. I recognized them immediately. They were my children. But the problem wasn't the conversation, it was the tone. It was as if they were talking about something that carried the weight of an urgency I didn't understand, something that shouldn't reach my ears. When I tried to approach, I heard hurried footsteps, and their bedroom door slammed shut. Even from a distance, I could hear a muffled phrase. "We need to resolve this soon before it gets worse." My heart tightened. It wasn't the first time I'd heard something like that. In recent months, small details had begun to bother me, like loose pieces of a puzzle I still couldn't put together. First came the strange phone calls. They would go out to answer them in the backyard, in the car, in the bathroom. They never answered near me, and when I did appear, the call would end abruptly. I would hear disjointed, incomplete phrases like, "Yes, but he doesn't know yet. We're looking into it. No, it can't be later. It needs to be right away." Once again, I found my daughter in the living room with a folder full of papers. As soon as she saw me, she slammed the folder shut so quickly that she even left half of a document sticking out. The paper fell to the floor when she pulled it, but she discreetly kicked it under the sofa with her foot and changed the subject as if nothing had happened. "Dad, would you like some tea?" she asked, with a smile that was too nervous to be natural. I didn't ask anything at that moment, but that doubt haunted me for the rest of the day. Another event that unsettled me was when I started noticing that some of my documents were disappearing. Not random documents, but precisely those that showed I had always been organized and responsible. Payment receipts, medical prescriptions, paid invoices, old contracts, important notes. I had a habit of keeping everything organized on my office desk, aligned, separated by color, by date, by category. But suddenly, they started to vanish. At first, I thought I'd forgotten where I put them, but then I noticed the pattern. Only papers that could prove my competence disappeared. Meanwhile, documents that could be used against me, like the traffic ticket I received months before, always remained visible, as if someone wanted me to look careless. One night, I found my oldest son talking on the phone in the backyard, pacing back and forth, his voice low but clearly irritated. I know, but we can't wait any longer. He's starting to get suspicious. We need to resolve this before the meeting." "A meeting? With whom? About what? About me?" I approached him, and as soon as he saw me through the glass door, he hung up the phone so quickly he almost dropped it. He came in with a forced smile, as if he wanted to convince me that nothing was happening. "Dad, I was talking about work," she said. But he never talked about work. He never brought work problems home. And worse, he didn't realize his hands were shaking. Over time. Other strange things began to happen. One day my spare key disappeared. Another day I found my office door locked, even though I had left it open. My daughter said that perhaps the wind had blown it, but the door only locks with a key, and the key was in my shirt pocket, exactly where I had left it. There was also the story about the doctor. They insisted I should schedule an appointment with a geriatrician. They said it was just routine, but I knew it wasn't. They escorted me to the door. My daughter came into the room with me, even though I said I didn't need to, and I realized she was trying to guide my answers. She interfered. She completed sentences I hadn't even finished. It was as if she wanted to construct an image, a narrative, of someone who was losing control of their own life. And then came the whispered conversations in the hallway. Words I didn't fully understand, but which carried enough tension to keep me awake at night. Sometimes it was like hearing a trial, unfolding before any accusations were even made. I'd walk through the door, and the whispers would cease, as if someone had pressed the pause button. They'd look at each other, exchange signals, and change the subject far too quickly. The more I observed, the more I felt there was a plan being hatched behind the scenes in my own home, something involving decisions about me, about my future, and that I wasn't allowed to know. The feeling was terrible, that of being the only one in a game whose rules everyone knows, except you. I tried to piece things together, but each clue was too vague. It was like watching shadows moving behind a curtain. I knew something was there, but I couldn't see it clearly. But one thing I was certain of. They were planning something big, something that needed to be resolved quickly. And although I didn't yet know what the objective was, something burned inside me like embers. That wasn't a concern. It was fear. I'm afraid of them. I'm afraid I'll find out too soon. And I was about to discover that all those whispers were just the beginning. The message arrived in a group my children had created months earlier, a group that was hardly used. Suddenly they wrote, "Dad, we need to talk. Tonight. It's important." That phrase, delivered with such cold, administrative demeanor, already made my chest tighten. There was no affection, no genuine concern. It was the kind of message you send to an employee, not a father. For the rest of the day, I felt the heavy air inside the house. Their footsteps were too restrained. The doors closed too slowly. The conversations were too fast. It was obvious. The meeting was no surprise to anyone, except me. When night fell, they were all sitting in the living room. One of those gatherings I always imagined would be filled with laughter, memories, and stories. But this time, no one smiled. No one hugged me. No one said, "Good night, Dad." Nothing. The air was freezing, even though no windows were open. And there was something about their arrangement on the sofa that bothered me. Lined up, almost rehearsed, as if they had practiced the moment before I came downstairs. In the middle of the table, a blue folder, the same folder I had seen my daughter hiding a few weeks earlier. I sat down slowly, not because I was weak, but because I was suspicious. And yet, at that moment, I had no idea what I was about to see. It was my oldest son who started it. "Dad, as we've already discussed, you've been going through some difficult times. Forgetfulness, distractions, worrying behavior. We are very worried about you," my daughter finished, in that rehearsed voice of someone trying to sound sweet, but carrying a hidden blade. I took a deep breath. "What were the difficult moments?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. They exchanged glances. It was that knowing look of someone who has already made up their mind but wants to involve you in the false illusion of dialogue. "Dad, you've lost your house key 3 times, she said. "I lost it once," I corrected, "and found it the same day." My son interrupted. "But that's not the point. You've been showing signs, small ones, but consistent. Constance." The word echoed in the room, as if they had made a list, as if they had cataloged my entire life over the last few months, but only the mistakes, never the successes. Then my daughter opened the blue folder, and he pulled out a thick document, full of stapled pages, with a title that made my stomach drop. Residential Care Agreement. Long-Term Care Institution. It was an admission contract, not a suggestion, not a draft, not an idea. It was a completed contract, with my information filled in, space for my signature, and theirs already signed as guardians. I felt drawn from within. "What is this?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. My daughter didn't raise her eyes. "Dad, this is the best way. It's the best for everyone." The phrase hit me in the face like a slap. The best for everyone. For them, perhaps. For their conscience. For their comfort. For their future, organized without me being a burden. My son then began to explain the plan calmly, as if he were talking to a child. That hurt more than anything. "Dad, you can't live alone anymore. It's dangerous. We can't be with you 24 hours a day. You know we work, have children, responsibilities." I took a deep breath. "I've always lived alone," I replied. "Even before you were born. I've always taken care of myself. I've always taken care of you. But now it's different," he retorted with feigned firmness. "Now we need to think about your safety and ours." And that last word, our, he gave everything away. That wasn't about me. It was about them, about their convenience, about the discomfort I represented. My daughter shoved the contract in my direction. "Dad, we don't need to fight. We just need you to sign. The spot is already reserved. We did everything for you. We did everything for you." As if planning my hospitalization, signing a contract without my authorization, and deciding the future of my life without consulting me were acts of love. I examined every detail of that contract. It wasn't something rushed. It was carefully planned. It included dates, amounts, visit times, a description of services, and the job opening number. They had gone there. They had visited the place. They had spoken with directors. They had done everything without telling me anything. My heart was beating so hard I could barely hear my own voice. "You decided this without me?" I asked, with a pain I couldn't hide. My daughter slammed the folder shut in anger. "Dad, that's how it has to be. You no longer understand what's best for you." My son added, "Dad, please, don't be stubborn. Don't make this difficult. We just want to resolve this quickly. Solve it quickly, as if I were an administrative problem, a nuisance, a pending case." I felt my face burning, not from shame, but from humiliation, because I finally understood what was happening. They had already decided my fate before I even sat down on that couch. I was no longer the father. I was the obstacle. I was the body that needed to be moved. I was the item that needed to be relocated to make their lives easier. And in that instant, as I looked at the contract, at the signatures, at the cold faces of my own children, I realized there was no affection in that meeting. There was no dialogue. There was no love. There was only one sentence. And at that moment, I felt something break inside, something deep, ancient, that sustained my love for them, because for the first time in my life, I felt discarded. Family betrayal never stems from concern. It never stems from love. It always stems from something hidden, something no one says, something disguised behind cold embraces, rehearsed speeches, and supposedly affectionate phrases like, "It's for your own good." When someone wants to control your life, the real reason is never on the surface. It's in what they don't say, in what they hide, in what they do when you turn your back. And in my case, all it took was paying attention to see that there was something much bigger behind that admission contract. Something that explained every whisper, every missing document, every hastily ended phone call, every "you can no longer live alone." For weeks, I felt there was a secret. But it was at that meeting, in front of the nursing home contract, that I realized they didn't want to protect me. They wanted to control me. Because when someone is hospitalized, especially against their will, something silent happens, something few people notice. That person loses the autonomy to sign documents. And who assumes this autonomy? The legal representatives. In this case, my children. I started putting the pieces together, one by one, and the more I connected, the clearer the truth they were trying to hide became. First, there was the question of home. That house that I built with my own hands, brick by brick, year after year, without anyone's help. The house where they grew up running through the hallways. The house where they ate, slept, studied, cried, laughed. The house was in my name, and always had been. I never wanted to sell. I never wanted to divide. I never wanted to mortgage. But in recent years, I've noticed strange looks when they talked about moving, investing, or better locations. They were discussing the price of real estate in the II neighborhood, the hidden value within that structure, and the opportunities we were missing. I always silenced those conversations, but they didn't. And then came the second point, the power of attorney. For some time, my son had been insisting that I sign a simple power of attorney, just to facilitate payments, consultations, and paperwork. He said it was for my comfort. I always refused. Always. And I refused because I know the world. What starts as easy often ends up as abuse. And now, seeing that completed contract on the table, I realized that the power of attorney was a central part of the plan. If I were hospitalized, incapacitated, under their guardianship, the power of attorney could be signed by them, not by me. My heart froze. But there was something even deeper, something that, until then, only I knew: the bank account. They knew I had some money saved, but they didn't know how much. Throughout my life, I saved money in silence, not out of greed, but out of prudence. I never flaunted anything. I never told anyone anything. My parents taught me that saving money is for protection, not showing off. But my children knew one thing: the account was only in my name, and they knew even more. Without my signature, nothing can be moved. And that's when their whole plan made sense. Excessive worry, whispered conversations, the prepared contract, the reserved spot, cold, blade-like phrases. It's best for everyone. You can no longer live alone. Dad, don't make it difficult. They didn't want to protect me from anything. They wanted to protect themselves from me. They wanted to protect themselves from the fact that as long as I had complete autonomy, they could never touch the house, the money, or any assets without my authorization. And then I realized the cruelest detail. In a nursing home, a person loses the right to sign freely. Every signature is subject to supervision by legal representatives. All transfers require authorization from the family. Every decision becomes mediated, and they already knew that. That was the reason. That's what they wanted to control. That was the secret behind weeks of preparation. It wasn't love. It wasn't a concern. It wasn't cared for. It was power. A power that could only be obtained by taking away from me the only thing that remained of my independence, my right to decide. And perhaps the most painful part wasn't the plan itself, but the fact that they thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I was too old, too weak, too slow. They thought it would be easy. But what they didn't know is that I had always been watching everything. I always understood more than I let on. I was always much more observant than they realized. And now, with all the pieces in front of me, only one certainty remained, burning inside me. They wanted my signature, but they would have to tear it off by force. The room was still filled with the heavy silence that followed the revelation of the contract. It was as if the air had thickened, as if each breath were an effort. The paper with my name printed on it, but without my signature, seemed to gleam on the table, drawing attention like a cruel reminder of everything they were trying to take from me. I stared at it for several seconds, seconds that felt like years. And finally, I let out the words that had been burning inside me. I am not going. The sentence didn't come out loud. It wasn't a shout, but it carried such weight, such a profound weight, that it left my children unsure how to react for a few moments. They looked at each other, surprised, as if they hadn't considered the possibility of the plan going wrong, as if in their minds I was already emotionally defeated, ready to accept everything. My daughter was the first to react. Her face changed, from feigned pity to genuine irritation. Dad, please don't start. We've thought of everything. It's the best thing to do. I am not going, I repeated more firmly. You can sign whatever you want. You can plan whatever you want. You can invite whomever you want. But I'm not going anywhere. My oldest son sighed, exasperated. He ran a hand over his face, got up from the sofa, and began pacing the room like someone trying to contain his own anger. Dad, you're being irrational, he said. You haven't even heard all the information about the place. There's a doctor. There's monitoring. There are activities. Don't you understand that you would be safe there? Safe? I asked, my voice trembling more from pain than anger. I've been safe in this house my whole life, and now you want to take it away from me. He stopped in front of me. Try, because you can't live alone anymore. The word alone struck me. It was true. I was alone. Loneliness weighs more than age, more than any diagnosis. But being alone doesn't mean being incapable, and they knew it. I lived alone while you were growing up, I replied. I lived alone while you were studying abroad. I lived alone while I built everything you now want to control. My daughter slammed her hands on the table, something she had never done in her life. Dad, you don't understand. We can't be taking care of you all the time. Ah, so that was it. They didn't want to take care of it. They wanted to get rid of the responsibility and to disguise it as love. I didn't ask to be cared for, I replied. I asked to be respected. They remained silent, an uncomfortable silence, not one of reflection. It was a frustrating experience, because their plan depended on one thing. I accepted it silently, but I didn't accept. Dad, my son spoke again, now with a more aggressive tone, his face tense, his eyes impatient. Please, don't make it harder. Don't make this worse than it needs to be. That phrase I'll never forget, because she showed everything. For them, I was the problem. I was the obstacle. I was the item that needed to be adjusted. I am not going, I repeated. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. My daughter took a deep breath. He swallowed hard. When she spoke, her voice had that mixture of emotional blackmail and calculated coldness, the perfect combination for family manipulation. Dad, we just want to prevent the worst from happening. What if you fall one day? What if you forget to turn off the stove? What if you have a breakdown? What if you lose everything because of a mistake? I've already lost everything, I replied, finally letting the pain overflow. I've lost you all. She blinked a few times. Maybe she felt the blow, maybe not, but it wasn't all pain. It was dignity. I was fighting for more than just the house, not just for the money, not just for autonomy. I was struggling with my identity, because when they take away your freedom to decide, they take away your soul. When they force you to sign something you don't want to, they take away your voice. And when they treat you as incapable, they erase your entire history. I'm not going, I repeated for the fourth time. You can do whatever you want, but I'm not giving up what I've built. My son took a step back, frustrated, angry, defeated for a moment. But it wasn't a genuine defeat. It was impatience, because he was already thinking about the next step, in the next argument, in the next strategy. And then came the phrase that destroyed me more deeply than any other. Dad, nobody will believe you. Nobody. That word struck me like an arrow. Free, cruel, surgical. I knew exactly what she meant. If they decided to claim that I was incapable, if they brought a doctor, if they brought the social worker, if they were to create a document, who would believe me? Who would listen to my side of the story? Who would defend me? I was just a lonely old man. They were the worried children, and the world always believes in the younger side, in a more organized discourse, which seems most sensible. The truth at that instant fell upon me like a stone. I was too alone to win, too weak to physically resist, but strong enough to try, and even without anyone by my side, even without proof, even without support, I said in the firmest voice I could muster, you can try to destroy my word. You can try to have me committed. You can try to take everything, but you will never take away my conviction that I am right. The room fell silent. None of them expected me to confront them. None of them expected me to have enough courage to resist. And that was just the beginning, because their struggle is to silence me. I was about to stumble upon my struggle to exist. Life has a cruel way of turning everything upside down in an instant. Sometimes it's just an envelope, a simple brown envelope delivered by a court officer with a neutral expression, as if he were bringing a notice of a delayed package, not a sentence that could destroy an entire life. That's how it happened. It was morning. I was sitting on the porch, drinking the coffee I had made myself, because, contrary to what my children claimed, I was still taking care of myself, following my routine, organizing everything as I always had. When I heard the gate open, I looked up. A man in a white shirt and carrying a black briefcase approached. "Sir," he said, confirming my name, "I have a court summons here." The word summons made my stomach churn. He handed me the envelope, asked for my signature as if following a cold protocol, and left as quickly as he had arrived. I stood there, holding that envelope as if it were a bomb about to explode. And in a way, it was. When I got home and opened the paper, my hands started to tremble. The document said, in large, official, non-negotiable letters, "Hearing for assessment of civil capacity." For a second, I lost my breath. It felt like the world had become smaller, tighter, crushed around me. My children were trying to have me declared legally incompetent. It was no longer a silent plan, a whispered conversation, a hidden contract. It was a process, formal, real, irreversible, and suddenly, everything made sense. The meeting, the phone calls, the missing documents, the social worker, the contract is ready, the insistence that I sign something. It was all part of a bigger, more careful, and more cruel scheme than I had imagined. When my children arrived that late afternoon, as if nothing had happened, as if they were just visiting their father, I was sitting on the sofa, with the summons open beside me. "Dad," my daughter began, placing her bag on the chair. "Don't be alarmed by the paper, it's just a procedure, a formal thing." My son nodded. "This doesn't mean anything significant. It's just to organize things. We want to avoid problems in the future. Avoid problems. Problems was me." My voice came out low but firm. "You're taking me to court, as if I were legally incompetent." They exchanged glances, trying to hide the strategy that was already blatantly obvious to me. My daughter sat down next to me, holding my hand, a performance so obvious it almost made me nauseous. "Dad, you're exaggerating. This hearing is just to assess your situation. The judge will decide whether you need support or not." "Support?" I interrupted, feeling my chest burn. "Support is when someone helps you to your feet, not when they push you into a nursing home. Support is when someone lifts you up, not when they bury you alive." My son lost his temper. "Dad, this is for your own good. The judge will only see if you are capable of continuing to manage everything on your own. It's normal." Normal. This was definitely not normal. He was wicked. I held up the document, trembling with indignation. "You requested this hearing. You initiated the process. You wrote that I no longer have full legal capacity. What right do you have?" Their faces changed. The mask has fallen. The affectionate tone evaporated. The truth came out. Raw, direct, bitter. "Dad, we need to sort out the situation at home," my son said bluntly. "We need access to things. We need to get your life in order. This can't go on." My daughter added, "And the judge will decide what is best for you." That sentence encapsulated everything they truly thought. That I no longer had the right to decide. That I no longer had a voice. That I was no longer in control of my own life. I felt my body tremble. I felt the loneliness weigh on me like never before. I felt fear pierce my chest like a knife, because now it was no longer a family argument. It was a legal process. And in their eyes, I saw, for the first time, a cold certainty. They believed they had already won. Because in the eyes of the law, elderly parents are not considered strong, experienced, or capable people. They are vulnerable. They are fragile. They are easy to label, easy to neutralize, easy to silence. And when justice gets involved, the truth becomes a detail. I was about to enter a courtroom where every word I spoke could be used against me, where every little oversight would be turned into evidence, where every change in routine would be interpreted as deterioration, where my own children would be sitting on the other side, pointing at me as if I were a threat. The injustice of that moment crushed my heart, because I have always been an honest man. I have always been honest. I always took care of them. I have always put my family's well-being above my own. I have always been the foundation. And now, I was the defendant, a defendant in a war I never wanted to fight. And there, holding that document, I understood a cruel truth. They didn't want me to sign anything at the nursing home. They wanted the judge to sign for me. And at that moment, for the first time, I felt real fear. Fear of losing everything. Fear of being erased. Fear of being declared incapable by those who have never known my abilities. Fear of being buried alive while still alive. But above all, fear of losing the only thing I've ever had, my dignity. The day of the bye. Hearing dawned gray, heavy, as if the sky itself knew what was about to happen. I didn't sleep that night. I walked all over the house, touched the walls, the furniture, the picture frames, like someone silently bidding farewell to their own life before being torn from it. Each step echoed inside me like a warning. Today, they will try to erase you. When the clock struck the hour, I put on my best clothes. Not because I wanted to impress the judge, but because this would be the last battle of my dignity, and I would not go in defeated. The courthouse building was large and cold, with long corridors that smelled of old paper mixed with cheap perfume and anxiety. People walked hurriedly, lawyers carried stacks of files, employees called out names loudly, and each of my steps felt like it weighed a ton. I arrived at the door of the courtroom. My children were already there, and it was at that moment that I felt the deepest blow. They didn't look at me the way children look at a father. There was no affection, no concern, no hesitation. They looked at me as if I were facing an obstacle, an enemy, a legal problem. The coldness in their eyes shocked me more than any document. My oldest son was in a suit, holding a black briefcase like a lawyer. My daughter, in formal attire, was on her cell phone with a serious expression, as if that day were just another appointment on her calendar. Behind them, a woman I had never seen before, their lawyer, was organizing papers with the efficiency of someone who had already brought down many innocent elderly people in cases like this one. When they saw me, they exchanged glances. They whispered something to the lawyer. She smiled, a small, cold smile, like someone who believes they've already won. The bailiff opened the door. "Capacity assessment hearing. You may enter." I walked through the door, my heart pounding. The room was smaller than I had imagined. A dark wood table occupied the center. The judge, a serious man with thick glasses and a tired expression, was quickly reviewing documents. There were shelves full of files behind him, a flag to the side, a clock ticking too loudly. The sound of that clock filled the entire room. I sat down to one side, my children from the other side. Their lawyer slowly opened her briefcase, as if presenting irrefutable evidence before even speaking. The judge adjusted his glasses, looked at me for a few seconds, enough time to perceive my vulnerability, my age, my nervousness. He then turned his attention to them. "Who requested the lawsuit?" My son raised his hand confidently. "We, Your Honor, are the children. We are worried about our father," the lawyer finished in a soft, rehearsed voice. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of progressive incapacity. He has demonstrated difficulties in managing finances, maintaining autonomy, and preserving his safety." Each word was like a stab wound. Of course. Progress. Disability. I took a deep breath to avoid falling apart. The judge looked at me. "Do you wish to say anything before we begin?" My voice faltered for a second, but I managed to keep it steady. "I want to. I'm perfectly capable. I live alone. I take care of myself. I pay my bills. I stared intently at my children. "Are doing this out of self-interest, not out of love." The judge did not react. He simply made a silent note. Their lawyer leaned forward with the arrogant confidence of someone who has the terrain under control. "Your Honor, we have brought documents that prove the need for family intervention. Forgetfulness, overdue bills, domestic hazards, social report." She shoved a stack of papers toward the judge. I tried to control the trembling of my hands. The room seemed smaller, more stuffy. The judge took the documents. He opened the folder. He flipped through it page by page. And then he frowned. "We're missing a recent medical report," he said. The lawyer tried to hide her tension. "Your Honor, we are taking care of it." He raised his hand, asking for silence. "No. In such cases, I cannot proceed without a signed and dated medical report from the indicated period, nor do I see here any express authorization from the person being evaluated for access to their health data. And then something happened that no one expected. He slowly turned his gaze towards my children. "Who sent these documents?" he asked. My son swallowed hard. But it's just that there is no signature from him," the judge added. And, "According to the law, unauthorized documents lose their validity in this context." The lawyer tried to argue, "Your Honor, as those responsible, they are not yet legal guardians." "Doctor," the judge interrupted firmly, "that's exactly what we're evaluating here." Silence. A silence that tore through the air. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was echoing inside the room. For the first time, I felt that someone there could see me. The judge turned to me. "Did you bring any of your documents?" I was paralyzed. My chest tightened. And then, something inside me lit up. Hope. I opened the folder I brought with me. Small, simple, but organized. Containing receipts for paid bills, medical prescriptions, updated documents, and signed contracts. "Yes, I brought it, Your Honor." The judge's hand touched my papers. He flipped through it slowly. With each page, his expression changed. "These documents," he murmured, "they're all in order, organized, up to date." My son tried to interfere, but that proves nothing. He may have prepared this just for today. The judge looked up, irritated. "It proves that he is functional, autonomous, aware of his own responsibilities, and most importantly, it shows that there was no sudden or prolonged incapacity." Their lawyer started sweating. My daughter bit her lip. My son gripped the table tightly. I was trembling. I breathed for the first time in days. The judge closed their file. It closed mine. He rested his hands on the table, and he said, "There is something wrong with this process. Very wrong." My children's eyes widened. The room became freezing. I just didn't know yet how much that would change everything. The silence inside the courtroom was so dense you could almost touch it. The judge continued examining each document with the precision of someone who had seen many similar cases. Many children disguising self-interest as concern. Many elderly people being pushed to the bottom of life as if they were dead weight. My children were tense. Their lawyer, once so confident, was now frantically flipping through papers like someone desperately searching for a way out of a sinking ship. And then the unexpected happened. The judge asked, "Officer, please bring the supplementary file that was attached to the case file. There's a folder missing." The lawyer's eyes widened. My children fidgeted in their chairs. The officer left and returned a few minutes later with a thick bundle, tied with an elastic band. It looked old, forgotten, as if it had been stored for years in some old filing cabinet drawer. "Here, Your Honor." The judge opened it slowly. The elastic band snapped. Yellowed paper, leaves in good condition, signatures notarized. The children leaned forward nervously. I recognized that folder immediately. It was my personal file, what they thought they had emptied when they started rummaging through my desk, but which, through carelessness or ignorance, they hadn't taken completely. The judge flipped through the papers, paused for a long time, picked up one of them, and said something that made the ground disappear beneath my children's feet. "Interesting. Very interesting." The lawyer tried to get a better look at the document, leaning forward discreetly, but the judge raised his hand. "Calm down, doctor. We'll get there." My children started breathing faster, and then the judge read aloud, "I, narrator's name, in full physical and mental capacity, declare that any subsequent attempt by third parties, including family members, to obtain power of attorney, guardianship, or representation without my express consent shall be considered invalid and challenged in court. This document revokes any and all previous powers of attorney, guaranteeing my autonomy over my assets and decisions as long as I am able to recognize, sign, and express my own will." Silence. Absolute. My daughter put her hand to her mouth. My son turned pale. His lawyer froze. The judge continued, "A dated, signed, and notarized document from 2 years ago." He looked up and stared at me. "Do you remember writing this?" And I replied, my chest firm for the first time in a long time. I remember. I did it because I know my children. The lawyer tried to react, stumbling over her own voice. Your Honor, that doesn't invalidate the current concern. It doesn't mean that— The judge cut without mercy. That means, Doctor, that he was fully aware 2 years ago of the possibility of being coerced by family members. This means he predicted exactly this scenario. It means that he took legal measures to protect his autonomy. He slammed the document firmly on the table. And it mainly means that this process may be an attempt to violate the expressed wishes of the person being evaluated. My children were in shock. The lawyer tried one last card. But he may have lost capacity during that period. That doesn't prove that— Proof that he knew what he was doing, the judge interrupted. And it proves that he still knows. The documents he brought today demonstrate lucidity, organization, and full functionality. Meanwhile, he turned to my children. You presented incomplete reports, unauthorized documents, and very serious omissions. Then he looked at the folder again. And here's one more thing. My children held their breath. The judge pulled out another document, this time with a red tab. We have here a recent medical report, very recent, signed by a certified neurologist, also recognized, also valid. My heart almost stopped. A report? I asked, incredulous. The judge nodded. A report done 3 months ago, a complete cognitive evaluation. And here it is, word for word. He read slowly. The patient demonstrates full cognitive capacity, coherence, preserved memory, and adequate lucidity to make legal and personal decisions. There is no indication of incapacity, cognitive deterioration, or imminent risk that would justify judicial intervention. My daughter started crying. My son closed his eyes, defeated. The lawyer slumped into her chair. I recognized the report. I did it on my own without telling anyone, after seeing the first signs of the conspiracy. But they never knew. They never imagined it. They never looked. They never thought that the old, incapable man could anticipate things. The judge stacked the 2 documents, the expert report and the revocation letter, and declared, these are sufficient to completely invalidate the claim of incapacity. Moreover, he looked at my children sternly. These documents suggest that you acted in bad faith. The word landed like a bomb. Bad faith. My son tried to babble something. My daughter was sobbing. The lawyer was trying to gather arguments that didn't exist. And then the judge said the phrase that completely changed everything. All. This process is not only rejected, it's closed. It will be forwarded for investigation of possible family abuse and attempted improper guardianship. My children have turned as pale as corpses. I sat there trembling and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Justice, not revenge, not hate. Justice. The document they ignored, the document they left behind, the document they disregarded. That's exactly what saved me. The coup de grace. The courtroom was so silent that the ticking of the clock seemed to echo within my bones. After finding the document my children had ignored, the one that revoked any attempts at child support, the judge adjusted, his glasses, took a deep breath and said, I'll read it in its entirety. And when he said that, I knew the truth would be revealed before everyone. No filters, no masks. There's no chance of a lie surviving. He began, I, name, in full possession of my mental faculties, hereby decree that no person, including my children, may apply for guardianship, curatorship, or power of attorney on my behalf without my express authorization. The judge's voice filled the room. Each word was like a hammer, striking an anvil. My children immediately turned pale. My daughter put her hand to her mouth. My son sank into the chair, as if he had been emptied from the inside. The lawyer, real estate. But the hardest blow was yet to come. The judge continued, I am making this statement because I am aware of the risk of third parties attempting to seize my assets during a vulnerable time. That's right. Their world collapsed. The judge leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, staring at each of my children as if he were piercing their souls. This document shows that your father was not only lucid, but also aware of possible manipulation attempts. My daughter started crying. My son squeezed his eyes shut, trying to contain his anger or fear. Furthermore, the judge added, raising another sheet of paper, this recent medical report proves that he is in perfect cognitive condition. He held up the paper, displaying the stamp, the date, and the neurologist's signature. Perfect condition, the judge repeated slowly, as if he wanted those words to be etched into their skin. The lawyer tried to intervene. Your Honor, we would like to remind you that our clients acted solely out of concern. The judge raised an eyebrow. Concern? Is this what they call concern? She turned to the papers handed over by my children. Those fabricated, exaggerated, or manipulated accounts. He raised them up. Here you report that your father left the stove on for hours. Is that true? He asked. It only happened once, my daughter murmured, trembling. He was distracted. And for how many minutes was the stove on? The judge retorted emphatically. She hesitated. The silence gave everything away. The judge continued, now looking at my son. Here you say he forgot his own address. The judge held up another piece of paper, but he correctly registered the address in several documents he himself submitted. My son swallowed hard. Your Honor, we only want what's best. Whose good is it? The judge interrupted. He paused dramatically, leaving the two of them with no way out. Let's get to the facts. He read another part of the file. The social worker reported receiving alarming information from family members, constant forgetfulness, aggressiveness, fire hazard, and inability to manage finances. The judge tapped his finger on the paper. Where is the proof of that? My children remained silent. The lawyer tried to hold the folder, but her hands were trembling. The judge continued mercilessly. The document shows that you manipulated the social worker with distorted information and omitted important facts, such as the medical report proving your father's full capacity. He looked at the two of them, one at a time. That's not a concern. That's a lie. It's manipulation, and it's an attempt to seize property. My daughter started sobbing. We just wanted to help. To help? Helping means being present, the judge repeated, almost indignantly. Helping means attending. Real consultations. Helping means asking what he needs. It's not about filing for incapacity to control bank accounts, house, and assets. The words ricocheted around the room like gunshots. I was sitting there, trembling. But for the first time, it wasn't fear. It was a relief. Someone was finally noticing me. Someone was finally standing up for what I had been shouting about alone for weeks. The judge flipped through the file again and picked up another page. This time, the one my children feared most. It says here that you have simultaneously requested emergency authorization to obtain full power of attorney over him, alleging imminent risk. He turned to them. And why didn't they mention that at this hearing? They were speechless. It was the end. The judge pressed the sheet of paper firmly onto the table. Do you know what this is called? He paused. Financial interest. Attempted appropriation. Mafe familiar. My son tried to speak, but his voice came out weak. Dad, I'm sorry. We were just trying to... But the judge cut him off. The only person here trying to defend themselves is him. And then, as if it were the most anticipated moment of the entire hearing, the judge turned to me. You demonstrate clarity, organization, autonomy, and above all, awareness. No evidence presented by their children supports their incapacity. I closed my eyes. The tears came without me wanting them to. The judge continued. The process is complete, and it will be considered a case of possible family abuse. The public prosecutor's office will be notified. My children sank into their chairs. The lawyer lowered her head. I took a deep breath. Finally, after so much fear, so much loneliness, so much injustice, the truth they didn't want to hear was exposed, out loud, in front of everyone. And for the first time, someone defended me. The room remained immersed in that suffocating mixture of silence, tension, and shame. But for the first time since the beginning of that legal torture, I wasn't the target. I wasn't the accused. I wasn't the vulnerable one. The judge's gaze, heavy and firm, pierced through my children, as if dismantling every lie they had constructed, every manipulation they had tried to maintain. He took a deep breath, adjusted his glasses, and declared, This court completely denies the request for disability assessment and any measure of compulsory hospitalization." The words echoed like thunder. My daughter shuddered. My son put his hands to his face. The lawyer lowered her head, defeated. I stood motionless. It was as if my body couldn't believe what my ears had just heard. It felt like waking up after weeks trapped in a nightmare. The judge continued, now in an even harsher tone. "Furthermore, I hereby officially state that the process presented by the children shows evidence of bad faith, manipulation of information, and an attempt to improperly obtain guardianship and control of assets." He slammed the gavel on the table, not as closure, but as moral punishment. "Therefore," he continued, "this case will be referred to the public prosecutor's office for evaluation of emotional and financial abuse against an elderly person. Depending on the analysis, legal action may be taken against the applicants." My children were in complete shock. I will never forget the exact moment my eyes met theirs. They were empty, defeated, exposed. No masks, no justifications, no power. Justice was finally on my side. The judge then turned to me. His expression softened, not out of pity, but out of recognition. "You are not alone," he said, "and you are not in danger of losing your autonomy. Your documents demonstrate impeccable organization. Your speech is coherent. Your reasoning is clear. The medical report confirms your full capacity." I felt something inside my chest break, but this time, not from pain. It was a relief. It was like breathing again after weeks of suffocation. The judge continued, "To ensure that situations like this do not happen again, I will determine protective measures. Any new request for involuntary commitment must undergo an independent psychological evaluation. Any further attempt to obtain power of attorney or guardianship over you will require your signature and mandatory presence. The social worker will be officially notified about the manipulation of information, and you may request free legal assistance if you wish." His final words were like a firm hand on my back. "You have the right to continue living wherever you want, however you want, for as long as you want. Your freedom is guaranteed by law." My throat tightened. My hands were trembling. I felt my eyes welling up with tears that I had been holding back since the beginning of this war. "Thank you, Your Honor," I managed to murmur, my voice choked with emotion. He nodded respectfully. "You deserve respect and justice." When I stood up, I felt lighter than at any point in the last few weeks. My children, seated there, couldn't even look up. The lawyer nervously arranged papers, trying to feign professionalism where there was only defeat. I walked to the door. Each step was a piece of my dignity being returned to me. Each breath was an achievement. Each beat of my heart said, "You won." As I approached the exit, I paused for a moment. I didn't look back, not because I despised my children, but because at that moment, they didn't deserve my gaze. Open the door, and when I stepped into the courthouse hallway, the tears finally fell. Heavy, hot, liberators. I cried like someone who had escaped an unjust fate. I cried like someone who fought alone and won. I cried like someone whose dignity had been ripped away and then regained with redoubled strength. Outside, I leaned against the cold wall and ran my hand over my face. I felt my shoulders relax. I felt my heart slow down. I felt, for the first time in a long time, peace. I was free. Free from hospitalization. Free from manipulation. Free from fear. And above all, free from the shadow of injustice. Life had given me back what my children had tried to steal: my freedom, my voice, my own existence. The drive home felt different that day. The streets were the same, the sidewalks the same, the trees the same, but something in me had changed forever. I walked slowly, not because I was tired, but because each step carried a new meaning. I wasn't just going back home. I was returning to myself. When I arrived in front of the gate, I stood there for a few seconds, looking at that house. The same facade that was once a source of pride then became an object of covetousness, and almost became the setting for my forced exile. There were the walls that heard my laughter, my outpourings, my silences. There I grew up as a man, as a father, as someone who struggled to build a minimally dignified life. For a moment, I felt a tightness in my chest, not out of sadness, but I'm grateful to still be there. I opened the gate with my own hands. The metallic sound echoed like a stark reminder. That was still mine, not just in the documents, but in its essence. That house was an extension of my history, and no one had the right to take it away from me. I entered slowly, touching the door frame, the light switch. The familiar smell greeted me, the same smell of morning coffee, of Sunday food, of simple life. This time, however, there was something different in the air. It was no longer the home of a man who was threatened, cornered, and about to be wiped out. It was the home of someone who had just defended themselves, and won. I went to the room. The table where they had placed the admission contract was still there. Empty. No files, no paperwork, no lawyers, no children trying to decide my future. I ran my hand across the wooden tabletop as if closing a chapter. Then I went to the office. There were my drawers, my files, my meticulous organization. There, too, was proof that I was always capable. Proof that they tried to erase, but that justice rescued. I opened the drawer where I used to keep things that were important. I carefully placed there the medical report, the letter revoking any attempt at control, and a copy of the court decision. As I was closing it, I thought, this time it's not about protecting my money. It's about protecting myself. I sat in the living room armchair, the same one where I'd spent so many nights watching TV alone, not because I wanted to, but because time had, distanced everyone. But now loneliness had a different flavor. Before, it was a loneliness that hurt, that made me feel abandoned, ungrateful, and unjust. Now, it was a solitude filled with freedom. I didn't have anyone hugging me at that moment, but there was also no one trying to have me committed. No one was lying to social workers. No one was making decisions for me. And this absence, it was, in a way, a form of peace. What hurt the most in this whole process wasn't the nursing home contract, nor the summons, nor the lies. What hurt the most was discovering just how far one's own children are capable of going when they confuse love with self-interest, care with control, and concern with possession. But at the same time, something inside me matured in a way I never thought possible at this age. I learned that blood relatives aren't always the ones who protect you. I learned that sometimes the person who talks most about what's best for you is precisely the one most willing to destroy you from the inside. I learned that the worst prison isn't an asylum. It's a life where you can't choose. I looked around and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had faced the fear of being declared unfit. I had faced a judge, lawyers, documents, stamps, legal terms, cold stares. I had seen my own children sitting on the other side of the table, and yet I was there, whole, standing. I owned myself. I got up slowly and went to the hallway mirror. I stared at myself. I saw wrinkles, signs of aging, dark circles accumulated from sleepless nights. But I also saw something that I hadn't seen with my own eyes in a long time. Respect. Not the respect that comes from the outside. Respect that comes from within. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see myself as a burden, but as someone who survived. And then there, looking at myself, I thought, I've lost many things in life, but I'll never lose myself again. I can't deny it. It hurt. It hurt to know what my children were capable of doing. It hurt to realize that their love had a price, a deadline, a condition. It hurt to know that for them, I had ceased to be a father and had become merely a financial burden. But at that moment, I also understood something important. I cannot control their hearts, but I can protect mine. And it begins with a silent but powerful decision. I will never again let anyone decide who I am. I will never back down again when they try to silence me. Never again will I accept as care what is, in fact, control. I sat down again. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. I knew that from then on, family relationships might never be the same again. Perhaps there were distances, silences, separations. Perhaps there would never be sincere requests for forgiveness. But even so, I was at peace. Because in the end, there are things that no one can take from you unless you give them up. And I decided I will never give up again. If this story captivated you, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me bring you more profound stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, has anyone ever tried to decide your life for you?